نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Before I introduce our guest physicians that are with us today, I'm going to ask the brothers to please come forward. The Prophet ﷺ, when he saw some of his companions, some of them sitting here, some of them sitting there, and he was addressing them, he said, "Ma li arakum izin, yani mutafarriqin." Why is it that you all is all spread apart? Bring it in, jazakumullah khairan. Tonight, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with a great opportunity to benefit from two local Muslim physicians. Alhamdulillah, to my right is Dr. Ali Faruqi, who is an anesthesiologist at Jefferson Northeast. Let me just say this. Even though every doctor specializes in what they, whatever specialty they may choose, that doesn't mean that their knowledge of medicine is limited to that field. So alhamdulillah, we're going to be able to benefit quite a bit. I listened to the two of them talk with each other, and it's amazing the benefits that we can get, just medically as we prepare for the month of Ramadan. To my left is Dr. Zubair Malik, who is a GI, gastrointestinal physician at Temple University Hospital. Alhamdulillah, both of them will be sharing with us medical benefits, or maybe I should say be helping us work through how to deal with certain medical issues that many of us face in the month of Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as all of you know, has prescribed for us fasting. He says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun." Oh, you believe fasting has been prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you attain taqwa. And taqwa, as we'll discuss more tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, the essence of it is that you are putting a barrier between yourself and the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that you don't do anything that subjects yourself to His punishment. And so when you're fasting, you're a lot more conscious about what you're doing, you're a lot more conscious about what you're saying, and you are exercising self-discipline, which is one of the main components of at-taqwa. So fasting is a type of ibadah that helps lead towards taqwa. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then goes on to say, أياما معدودات فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخرى. That Ramadan has been poured, this fast has been prescribed, أياما معدودات, a limited number of days, which we know is 29 or 30 days each year. And then Allah says, but whoever among you is traveling or sick, فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ, then let him make up those days. Meaning he was traveling, so he broke his fast, or he was sick, so he broke his fast. Then let him make up the fast at another time, or other days. So, in other words, what we understand from this is that a person who is sick, the type of sickness that does not allow him to fulfill his obligation of the fast, then that is a rukhsa, or a license, or a concession for him not to fast. Does that mean that everything that we call an illness, including a headache or a toothache, allows you to break your fast? And those are some of the things that we'll talk about tonight, inshallah ta'ala. But we will also want to get down into your questions, your personal questions. You may have something that you're dealing with, the medicines that you have to take on a daily basis. You may be dealing with a chronic illness. Any of those type of things we're going to be talking about tonight, inshallah ta'ala. And the floor will be open for questions. So I've already got some questions, and there are certain common issues that just about everybody is dealing with or knows somebody that's dealing with. So we're going to start with some of those questions that we'll pose. And then if you have any of your own questions, inshallah ta'ala, we'll open up the floor for that. All right. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, and this is because of its prevalence, especially in our community, is diabetes and managing diabetes during the month of Ramadan. Just by a show of hands, does anybody here either have diabetes or have somebody in their household that is dealing with diabetes? Okay, so that's a significant number. All right, and we can't see the sisters obviously, but I'm sure that there's on the other side as well. So we're going to start with that issue. Diabetes, as you know, people who have diabetes often have to do what? Take insulin, okay. Eat a couple pills. Okay, perfect. Alhamdulillah. So you kind of familiar with what's happening, and that obviously can have an effect on a person's ability to fast, and for many people it does. So I'll start off. I don't care who begins, but if you could just talk to us a bit about what is diabetes and how a person can best manage that in the month of Ramadan.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. Firstly, I want to say I'm honored to be here and humbled to be able to try to help you guys answer some of your questions. And you guys hear all the time that the best of speech is the speech of Allah, so that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to tell you something that is going to be concise and it'll cover a lot of the questions. It's a story I came across. It's one of the doctors of Harun al-Rashid, who was one of the Khalifas in the Abbasid period. He had many doctors, as people who are kings do, and he had many physicians, and one of his physicians was a Christian physician. And he also had scholars around him, other than being a learned person himself. And so this Christian doctor asked one of the scholars there, you have your holy book, and in the whole book there's nothing about medicine at all. Not a single verse in the Quran about medicine. And the scholar, the alim, he said, no, rather Allah covered all of medicine in half of a verse. All of medicine in half of a verse. And he said, it is وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. Eat and drink, but don't go to excess, don't go to israf. إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. Allah doesn't love the people that go to excess. But if you look at all the diseases that we're plagued with in a developed society, they're tied to going to excess in eating, in drinking, and other affairs. So I think if we focus on that, a lot of your questions will be answered. And specifically as it relates to diabetes, we have to know that diabetes is mainly of two types. People that are insulin dependent and people that are not insulin dependent. So the two are different, and it makes a difference in terms of the recommendations that we give. I'm an anesthesiologist. Anybody here have surgery before, electively, meaning that you had to schedule something and you had to go to the hospital and have surgery? Well, what do they tell you? Somebody calls you overnight, and what do they tell you?
Don't eat or drink.
Don't eat or drink anything after midnight. So that's what? Fasting. That's fasting. So I get this question all the time. What medicine should I take? What medicine should I not take? So in regards to diabetes, if you're on insulin, I would say the easiest answer that I can give you is that you should not fast, with little hesitation. Unless you have a very special case, I think for me it's very simple. We do it on a medical basis when people need it for necessity, but they come in immediately and we check their sugar and we can deal with any issues. Meaning I can give somebody who comes in, their sugar is 50 and they're feeling sweaty, I can start an IV and give them something. And by doing that, in my opinion, their fast breaks. And for people that their sugar is way high, they're not gonna suffer acutely unless it's super high. I'm talking 400, 500, 600. If you've had that problem before, we can take your question. But most people, their sugar is within a normal-ish range. Even though it's high, your doctor may not be happy that it's 250. You're not going to get any immediate harm from your sugar being 250 or 300. So if you are in the insulin-dependent group, I would say you should probably abstain from fasting unless you can convince a few doctors that, hey, I can do it safely. Because there are 2 medicines that kill people in the hospital with mistakes and with people given the wrong dosage more than any 2 drugs. And the number 1 drug that does it is insulin. So I would say it's not a light thing, and I know everybody wants to fast and everybody wants to have the opportunity to do that in Ramadan, but you know, it's very easy if somebody doesn't eat and they kind of take their symptoms lightly, that they pass out somewhere and nobody's there to see them, and that's it, they pass away. Some older English-speaking brothers may remember Dr. Saleh. Anybody know that name? Oh yeah, he passed away from hypoglycemia, rahimahullah. So he was diabetic, so it's not something that you should take lightly. In Medina. So, people that are not insulin dependent, you're on pills like metformin, other pills, you can fast safely, but it depends on what you're taking, and you should adjust your medicine. So there are different types of medications. Some pills will not lower your blood sugar. They work differently. Some pills, they sensitize or increase the sensitivity in your body to take up more insulin. But your sugar can never go below or won't go below a normal level. Those are okay to take. But there's some other drugs like glipizide, other drugs that make your pancreas secrete more insulin. Those things, they can drop your blood sugar. So those can be dangerous if you're fasting. So it really depends what you're taking. And I would say if you're unsure, ask your doctor about, is it safe to be fasting on a daily basis? I'm sure they'll be happy to answer your question, and we can answer your question to the best of our ability if we know it. And if we don't, we'll refer you to somebody.
So just to add a few points to that, inshallah. Slightly different view on some of that, but we can discuss further, inshallah. But so one of the things that Jazakallah khair, bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah wa ba'd. Jazakallah khair for allowing us to be here, inshallah. It is a blessing for us to be able to discuss with everybody, inshallah, and to benefit before Ramadan starts. So one of the things with fasting is, particularly with people on insulin, there's 2 different types of people on insulin. There's type 1 diabetics, those who are either born with it or develop it at an early age. It's more of an autoimmune disease where your body is fighting itself. And then there's type 2 diabetes that comes with age, weight, eating habits, things like that, too much sugar intake. And they are managed slightly differently as well, even if people aren't insulin for both of those. Type 1 diabetics, I would tend to agree with Dr. Ali, is that those people are very brittle most of the time, and they can't tolerate those changes as much as somebody with type 2 diabetes. And there's a few studies out there looking at people who have diabetes and fasting. So unless you're super well controlled, it's harder to fast. Now there is some people, I don't know if anybody here is on an insulin pump, meaning they have a little needle stuck inside them. Insulin is continually given based on your blood sugars, and it can be adjusted very easily. Sometimes that's actually been shown to be the safest way to fast because it's a very short-acting insulin, and some of the sensors respond and change to your sugar, and you can monitor your sugars. One of the things that I read from many of the scholars is that people who do fast need to be very accurate with their blood sugar monitoring. So you need to be able to check your blood sugar throughout the day. If you're not willing to check your blood sugar throughout the day, then fasting isn't for you because you don't know where you're going to go with that blood sugar. 2 is that there's some people that feel when their blood sugars are low, and there's others that don't. If you are a person that can't feel when your blood sugar is low, you don't feel anything, and then all of a sudden you're out. You don't know anything. There's other people that when it starts getting a little low, they get sweaty, they feel something's wrong, and they know it's going to happen. So for those that don't feel it, maybe for them it's better not to fast because they're not going to know when they get to that point, whereas those that do feel it may have a little bit of a buffer zone in there to try and protect themselves. If they start feeling something, check your sugar right away, and if it starts getting low, break your fast. So that's some of the things that I saw about it. Again, with the medications by mouth, there's typically, you just adjust the doses a little bit, adjust the timings, but that's usually a little bit easier to tolerate. But with insulin, particularly if you use like a long-acting insulin at night, sometimes you decrease the dose. The one thing I personally would recommend, and I haven't necessarily read this anywhere, but these are some of the things you don't want to try out on Ramadan day 1. You want to try this 1 to 2 months before you start fasting. Have your blood glucometer with you. Check your blood sugar every hour. If you're going to be one of those people that's going to try and fast, in consultation with your doctor, because everybody's different. How their sugars are managed, how low or high their sugars go, you have to be able to talk to your doctor about this. If you try it out, you give yourself a half day first to see what your sugar is going to do and then break your fast. And then build up to the point where, okay, I'm doing this on a few days in a row without issues, maybe I can fast Ramadan. Or I can't even get to the end of one day, I'm not going to try this Ramadan, maybe I'll try for next year or something like that. So those are things that you should look at as well when it comes to diabetes.
So I think somebody asked about the proof for the quote. It's in Surah Al-A'raf. Yeah,
Is that
then
what that meant? I don't know what it says proof, don't eat and drink it. If that's in Arab.
Yeah, Surah Al-A'raf. Ya bani Adam khudhu zinatakum, which all you brothers do more than any other masjid, I would say. Take your adornment when you come to the masjid. Wakulu washrabu. Eat and drink. Wala tusrifu. And don't go to excess. And the other quote, if you're interested about the story about Harun al-Rashid, is mentioned by Ibn Muflih, who's a Hanbali scholar in the Adab al-Sharia.
Exactly. Okay. I'm just going to take the liberty here to hijack the questioning. So bear with me. Because since we're talking about diabetes, in general, what advice do you have for managing kidney health so that we avoid chronic kidney disease, which is very common in some communities? I just think that it's important for all of us to kind of just be a bit more aware of these things. A lot of people don't start thinking about this, until they're already in it, until they're already close to having kidney disease or something like that. So what are some of the things that we can do, and how is there anything that Ramadan might promote? I mean, just the different eating pattern, for example, that may promote better kidney health.
I would say it depends on the stage of your kidney disease. I'm not in the
Well,
front.
let's just say there's no kidney disease.
No
at all.
kidney disease. Unfortunately, the best thing for kidney health is drink a lot of water. So that will not help you in Ramadan. So I don't know of any particular benefit to fasting in terms of kidney health, but maybe Dr. Zubair does. But in terms of kidney health, if you've had kidney stones or you've had just medical kidney disease, they'll recommend that you drink a lot of water. So obviously that's something, in the period that you're able to eat or drink, that you make up. And you make sure you stay hydrated in the period that you are allowed to, eat and drink. So I would say that. But in terms of the benefit of fasting itself on the kidney, I don't know, to be honest with you.
So my understanding of that is, I agree with Dr. Ali, water is the best thing for your kidney, particularly if you don't have kidney disease yet. If you have diabetes, controlling your sugars are very important, not letting them get out of control. Keeping a low salt diet, low sugar, those things can also affect your kidneys. In Ramadan, we're gonna naturally keep our sugars low most of the day. One of the things that we need to try and do, all of us, not just those with health disease, but those with issues with diabetes or any other health problems, is watch your meals when you do break your fast. When it's permissible to eat at iftar, at suhoor, or in the night while you're eating, don't eat large excessive amounts. Eat small, moderate amounts. Stick with the healthy foods. A lot of us in Ramadan go to the fried foods right away. We go to the unhealthy stuff right away. We eat all through the night, and we don't monitor what we're doing. So sometimes that can actually push us the other way. That's why there's so many reports of people gaining weight during Ramadan, is because their unhealthy habits are so much greater through the night, and they're less active during the day when they're fasting because they don't want to do as much. So it's important for us to try and watch our diets, keep the sugars to a minimum, eat the healthier foods, and those things can promote kidney health or any other health. Improve your diabetes, improve high blood pressure, and the likes of those things, as long as you're staying with the proper diet.
Go ahead, you have a question directly related?
Yes. I didn't.
Go ahead.
Was you doing Q&A afterwards?
No.
Okay. My question is. My question.
Let's see if this one, and then we get back to
My
it.
question is, in light of the fact that in the Islam and the Muslim community we have a variety of cultural diets. For example, you mentioned like the types of foods that we eat when we do break our fast. As far as like a lot of the starchy foods, and you mentioned the fried foods, can you give some advice to the brothers and sisters as far as what type of nutrient-dense foods are more appropriate for us in our systems? You know, when we do break our fast. You know, being as though.
So to sum up the question for those who were not able to hear the question, the questioner is asking, or basically stating that you mentioned some of the foods that we should avoid while we're fasting. Not while we're fasting, but as we break our fast, we should avoid all food while you're fasting. But when we break our fast, and how certain habits that we may carry over with us throughout the night and eating all the time and so forth. But can you recommend any alternatives, things that are rich in nutrients and that will help to sustain sustain our health throughout the day once we for support, for example, or when we break our fast, so that we can have some clear ideas of the alternatives.
So there's a number of things you can do. So obviously look to the sunnahs of what I would tell you. Many things that the Prophet mentioned are being explored now that can help with sugar control, that can help with a lot of things that we're learning about now, that the Prophet told us about. For example, cinnamon. You may have heard something that cinnamon helps regulate your blood sugar. So you may want to look into those things. I don't have all those answers. I'm not an endocrinologist. But a lot of those things you can find, in something like this. This book is available. It's in English. It's published. It's a very old book. I'm sure many of you have read it. So I would return back to that. But in general, everything in moderation would be my answer. If you have something fried, don't beat yourself up. Just have one thing and have something else that's healthy. So as long as you're having a little bit of everything and not too much of one thing, and you're not filling up your stomach. I think most of us know the hadith that the Prophet said something to the effect of the worst thing that the son of Adam fills up is his stomach, and it's sufficient for him. Then he fills it up a third with food, a third with water, and the last third you leave for air. Just leave some empty space there. So I think if most of us follow that, getting into what particular food, I think the door is wide open as long as you do everything in moderation.
Yeah, there are certain things that can help as well. Things that are high fiber foods, particularly like vegetables, salads, fruits and vegetables, those can help. Things that digest slowly, complex carbohydrates they're called, they can help to fill you.
Like what? What has complex carbohydrates?
Like oatmeals and whole grain cereals. Any of these in the evening as well. These can hold you over for a longer period of time. You do want some fat in your diet. You do want some protein in your diet. Lean proteins are obviously better. Baked fishes or lean chicken, things like that, are better than the red meats. Avoid the fried foods as much as possible. That's not to say you shouldn't have any, but keep it in moderation. But I think a lot of fruits and vegetables and lean meats, and then some, you can get some pastas or oatmeals in there to kind of go a little bit longer. Or like wheats and lentils.
Let me just to follow up on something that Dr. Ali said. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says, "Ma mala'a ibnu Adam wi'a'an sharran min batn," that there's no vessel that the son of Adam fills that is worse than his stomach. It's sufficient for him لقيمات يقمن صلبه يعني that he has a few bites that allow his back to stay straight. In other words, you know, that you eat enough that keeps you going. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is interesting. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, but if you must, meaning you want more than just that which keeps you going. If you must, then a third for food, a third for drink, and a third for air, right? And to be honest with you, I mean, we all know ourselves, and I shouldn't even be, you know, saying the hadith, but I mean, it's a reminder for myself before anybody else, that if we follow the prophetic advice, subhanAllah, so many of the diseases that exist here that we suffer from are based on diet. They're diet-based. It's based on how you are eating and what you are eating and how much you're eating. So, and another thing, subhanAllah, is that the scholars of the past, and I don't know, right now I think it's Fudayl ibn Iyad, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, also quotes this, that there are 4 things that make the heart hard. And in other words, it keeps your heart from being soft and attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فضل الكلام وفضل الطعام وفضل المنام وفضل الاختلاط بالأنام. So basically, overeating, over drinking, oversleeping, what did I say? Over talking too much, overeating, oversleeping, and over socializing. These 4 things kill your heart. They make it hard. And so, that keeping that in mind when we talk about eating, Ramadan is even though maybe not specifically to, you know, to your kidney or to your heart or to your, but Ramadan is a time when you can actually scale it back, because the reality is that your stomach is going to shrink, and as long as you're not filling it all the way up again, you won't even feel a need to eat as much as you used to eat to feel satisfied. And so portion control becomes a lot easier in Ramadan. Like, you can actually use that time of the year to begin that intentional portion control. It'll be a lot easier than any other time of the year. And Allah knows best. There was a question that came about diabetes, so we'll go to that and then we'll come back to this.
The questioner asked if a person is hyperglycemic, that means your sugar is high. If you fast without taking medicine until the blood sugar regulates for the day, is this permissible? I.e., the blood sugar normally is 300 plus. Can fasting actually help regulate blood sugar? Again, I'm not an endocrinologist, but sometimes when you naturally fast at night when you sleep, the endocrinologists talk about 2 effects. One is called Samoji effect and the other is called the dawn effect. And quite the opposite. Your sugar, even though you're not eating, can actually go up overnight. So when you wake up, you'll have a higher blood sugar, even though you haven't eaten anything all night. So it really depends on your circumstance and your situation. That's a question for an endocrinologist who knows your pattern. If you have, depends on what meds you're on. But in general, can it? Yes, it can. And Allah knows best.
Two-part question. What are the symptoms of diabetes, and does exercising regularly help keep that away?
Yeah, exercising definitely helps keep away diabetes. Healthy diet and exercise is the best thing. Some of the symptoms of diabetes are a little bit hard. You have to recognize some things, but one of them is excessive urination, excessive thirst. Despite drinking a lot of water, still feeling thirsty all the time. Sometimes you can get headaches, or if it gets way too high, then you're talking about sometimes being confused or kind of losing thoughts. But usually it's more in that having to urinate a lot, having to drink a lot, and maybe starting to feel some like headaches or things. Dr. Ali, anything else?
I would say more often than not, medicine changes as time goes on. Sometimes the doctors will come together and decide to move the goalposts. Most people, when they get diagnosed with regular diabetes, they're asymptomatic. They have no symptoms. But they do a blood test and they do something called a hemoglobin A1C. And that hemoglobin A1C gives you a 3-month picture of how well your sugar has been or how high it's been over that 3-month period. Most people that are just non-insulin dependent diabetes type 2 people, they get diagnosed that way. They go for blood work with their doctor and they say your sugar is high, I'm going to send in hemoglobin A1C. And it used to be that the cutoff was higher, and now the cutoff is lower, but it actually was lower before, so they kind of met somewhere in the middle right now. So I think right now it's 7.
No, it's 6.5.
I think they moved it back up to 7. They keep changing the goalposts. So most of the time, you're asymptomatic. But you should get tested if you have a family history. If you're getting to a point where you're having to go to the bathroom a lot and you're feeling very thirsty, like all the time, then that's a worrisome sign that you should see somebody sooner rather than later.
Okay. So we have another question that came from the sister side.
If a female had brain surgery years ago and suffers from migraine, seizures, partial blindness, fatigue, and so on, but chooses not to take her medicines daily because she just doesn't, does this mean she has to fast? And is it okay for the sick person to fast on the days they feel they can? This is something discussed with Sheikh Tahir before. Just because you can't fast one day doesn't mean you don't have to fast all of the days. And so if there are certain days you're feeling okay and certain days you're not feeling okay, then the days you feel okay, fast, and the days you don't fast. I think the more important thing in that question is not taking your medicines just because you don't feel like it. A lot of these medicines, not taking them can have ill effects on your body and make things worse and make things harder for you. Now, if you're required to be on certain medicines during the day, and each condition varies, so it's not a blanket statement that you should or should not fast based on what medicines you're on. You have to discuss with your doctor and maybe find a Muslim doctor that you know or trust, as well as someone of an imam or a religious scholar that can help with this, and have a discussion amongst them of, this is my condition, these are the medicines I take, can I adjust the times of the medicine, can I do it before and after, or is this something that if I don't take during the day, I could cause myself bodily harm? And I think it's important to try and get on those medicines or find alternatives that work better for you with your doctor that can help manage your condition. Some of those things, and I don't know the specific details of why they happen or whatnot, but they're important to manage because they can get much, much worse without management now. And some of these things, if you don't manage early when you develop worsening condition, you're never going to get back to more of a healthy style. But if you manage it now, you can prevent complications and stay healthier. So I think that's the more important part of that question. But in terms of fasting on certain days and not, and in discussing with Sheikh Tahir before, there are certain people that are allowed to not fast, but they can fast maybe every other day or every third day based on their status. It's okay for them to do that and then make up some of those fasts that they miss after Ramadan ends. Or those that have a hard time in the middle of summer but can make it up in winter when the days are shorter, it's also permissible to do that based on, again, each case is individual and they should be discussed with both doctors and people of knowledge, not just one or the other, and make that decision based on your individual circumstances.
Let me, just as a general rule, if fasting in the day of Ramadan is going to cause your illness to worsen to the point that it is causing you bodily harm, it is haram to fast. It's not permissible to fast because you're not supposed to bring harm to yourself, especially the type of harm that could lead to, death or something close to it. All right, and some people fast simply because of their affinity for the month of Ramadan. And that's beautiful. Wallahi, I mean, that love that Muslims have for the month of Ramadan, it is a beautiful thing. It's not something that people who haven't experienced it can understand. And they almost try to figure out why do the Muslims get all excited about Ramadan? And like, what is there to get excited about? You're not able to eat when you want to eat. You can't drink when you want to drink. You guys got long days and you're out there working. And what is there to be excited about? Because they've never experienced it. And until you experience the beauty of fasting, what it can do for you, if you go into the month of Ramadan with the proper goals, right? My goal is not to get through the day. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to aid you to get through the day, inshallah. But my goal is to grow spiritually. That through that starvation of, my flesh and blood, I'm able to feed my soul. And you actually taste the sweetness of fasting. No pun intended. But you taste something when you fast, subhanAllah, that we get excited. And so what happens is, for a person that's done that for 30 years, 40 years, and then you tell them, no, this Ramadan you can't fast. That's like, nah, I'll die fasting, whatever. I just want to, I want to die pleasing Allah. But that's not the right thing to do. And this is why the scholars mention that if that fast is going to lead to bodily injury, then it is actually haram to fast, and that a person can make that up at a different time. As Dr. Zubair mentioned, there's some people that can't fast 16 hours in hot weather, but they can fast for 12 hours in cold weather. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that concession for those who cannot fast on those long days, but can make up that fast in other days. That we have plenty of winter in Philadelphia. Plenty of days where you can fast, by doing Mondays and Thursdays for 10 weeks. That'll be 20 days right there, for 10 weeks. And we're talking about, November to January, you're talking about 11.5-hour days. And it's cool. Like, you're not going to worry about, feeling dehydrated and so forth. So, that was just to kind of further elaborate on that last part of the question, which was about the permissibility of the sick person fasting. So a sick person can fast if that fast is not going to harm them, but they can also leave off the fast and fast at another time, depending on their illness. Let's start like this. Brother.
Common question. Thank you. Abdul Salam. They've all observed all 3 years. One of my first questions is, I'm a retired welder, working extreme heat
Yes.
and extreme cold.
Yeah.
I'm retired now in 2016. Now a lot of younger brothers coming up down, passing down, especially young Muslims.
Yeah.
When I was younger, my thing was trying to be tired, oatmeal, bread, and tea. And to another shake, as I got over there, lose protein about eat a heavy, so old meat. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? The second question was, what goes around in the Muslim community, at a certain age, you don't have to fast, you're too old, that live at a certain age. I'm 65 and I still feel like I can kick it.
Again, in terms of what to eat, it really depends on a different person. If you were diabetic, if you had issues with your cholesterol, it would really depend. But again, the safest thing is everything in moderation, and use things from the Sunnah, things that are like superfood, like a date. Talmud has, other than sugar, carbohydrates, there's potassium in there. There's other things that you can benefit from. And the Sunnah is to take an odd number of days. So I would recommend that. What was the second part of your question?
Age.
Oh, the age.
Whether you're too old to fast.
Yeah. I was going to say,
feel like that.
Your second question about age and finding difficulty. The level of difficulty is different person to person. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says that when He says, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ. fidyatun ta'amu miskin. And those people that can, but with difficulties, they fast, the solution for them is fidya. They give food to a poor person for each day that they didn't fast. Allah didn't say if you can't fast, absolutely. He said you can do it, but with difficulties. So you see, it's and that's the wisdom, I think, of the wording. You see, Allah chose the best of words. He didn't say people that are X, Y, or Z. He left it pretty, open. Each person can apply their own situation to that. So for you, a 65-year-old, you can do it with little difficulty. Somebody else might be able to do it with a little bit more difficulty. But somebody who's your same age but has a lot of other disease,
And had a liver transplant.
yeah, they have liver transplant, they have some other things going on, the level of difficulty for them may be significant. Even though if they do it, they could worsen their health, or they could, be comatose if the sugar is too low, or they could end up dying. So it really depends in terms of the level of your difficulty. And I'm sure we'll get to breastfeeding, but the same thing applies. If the woman, like Allah says, وَالْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا. Each person knows about themselves the best, more than even your doctor knows. If you tell your doctor your symptoms, and they give you some feedback based on what you tell them. So if you feel like you can do it, you're the most knowledgeable person in that regard in terms of your ability, feeling the strength. That's what I would say. But yeah, so but everybody's different, And one woman, let's say, if she breastfeeds, she feels like she can do it. She's different than another woman who, feels she can't do it because she is afraid for herself or for her breast milk. So it's I would say it depends on the situation and on you, on what you think your ability is.
Yeah, there's no particular age. It's just, health circumstances at those age. There's 85-year-olds that walk around with no medical problems, and they have no problem fasting. And then there's 35-year-olds with several medical problems, and it's as if they're old and can't handle it. So it's really each person's condition more than the age. And then, in terms of the working in extreme heat and cold, I read something about, if you're going to end up in the hospital from working in extreme heat or cold, that's one thing. But as long as you're not, that difficulty, you just have to try and train your body, really hydrate at night, take in foods that'll sustain you through the day. Dates, honey is also good. Honey has slow release sugar that releases throughout the day, rather than like just a spoonful of sugar that gives you energy now but goes away later. So things like that will help you out if you work in those difficult conditions. Inshallah, Allah rewards you for the hardship that you go through during the day of fasting.
One second, because I do want to address this the issue, since Dr. Ali brought up the issue of breastfeeding. Just some advice from a doctor who happens to also be a midwife. Pregnancy and breastfeeding. The usle is to fast, meaning that whether a person who is breastfeeding or pregnant, a woman who is breastfeeding or pregnant, or a person, I don't know, law in 2019. They said chest feeding now, not breastfeeding. Allah Adam. So that they should fast. They are not diseases, but vulnerable states. Most women can fast safely during pregnancy if they hydrate well. And you keep hearing this issue of hydration. That being said, honestly, and this is something that can help tremendously. If we can wean ourselves off of sugary drinks, it will help you tremendously, because you'll get addicted to water, and this is what you need to hydrate. Those sugary drinks are they're problematic. And if you can also get used to the taste, like even if you drink coffee and you need coffee, some of us do. If you can start getting used to the taste without sugar, you actually enjoy it more. But that's my own personal experience. These guys disagree. But I'm telling you, it has a better taste without the sugar. So anyway, to be successful, so most women can fast safely during pregnancy if they hydrate well. To be successful, they need to focus on diet and rest. Okay, so it's not just, and that's why it's going to be very different from woman to woman. If this is a pregnant woman who's also working outside of the home and her job is causing her stress, and she's, you know, her fasting is going to be different than, you know, a sister who's not doing that. When Ramadan falls in the summer, more women will find fasting too difficult. They can try alternate days. At the end of the day, they need to listen to their own body and not compare themselves to other women. And this is what Dr. Ali was saying when quoting the ayat, that every person is more aware of their own selves. In my experience, more women err by pushing themselves too hard than by not trying hard enough. Many women have difficulty because they are so busy cooking and cleaning for the husband and children that they get very little sleep. Men need to pick up the slack and reduce their expectations. Can we edit that part out? Walk that back. In addition, women need to keep cool and reduce activity in the daytime. So that's also another very important part, especially for, you know, sisters that are breastfeeding and pregnant. There's ways that you can manage it so that they can fast. Medically complicated pregnancies should be evaluated individually to the end of it. Fasting during breastfeeding is associated with reduced milk supply. Hydration is key. Again, many women will be forced to supplement with formula to prevent infant malnourishment. In my opinion, the baby has a right to the best milk, which is breast milk. Therefore, if all of our fixes, including intermittent fasting, do not result in a sufficient milk supply during the time when the baby is exclusively breastfeeding, first 6 months, then she should make it up later. The point here, and we could go on and on, but the point is that for some reason it became common in certain communities that women who are breastfeeding or pregnant do not fast and they don't make up the fast. And that is a very minority opinion amongst the scholars. It does not seem to be closest to the evidence. The evidence seems to suggest that they would be treated similarly to the person who is fasting or who is ill. Excuse me, to the person that is traveling or ill. That is, that if they want to and they can, and it's not going to harm them or their child, that they fast. And if they want to make it up later, then so be it. But not that they are totally exempt of the fast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
While they're reading that, I have a question for the youngsters. I've been waiting here for a long time. What was the first battle that the Prophet ﷺ fought against the pagans from Mecca? What's the first battle that they fought against them? If you know, you can raise your hand. The first major battle. Nobody? Raise your hand.
Come on, youngsters. All 10 of y'all.
Youngster, yeah.
20 of y'all.
Badr. And why did I bring that up, Badr? What month was Badr in? It was in Ramadan. So to your point about working in the heat and things of that nature, you know, we live in a relatively temperate environment. You have a special situation, but in general, even if it's in the summer, it's not 120 degrees like it is in Medina, you know. So, you know, and sometimes we don't live in a culture where things shut down in Ramadan, but that definitely is the culture in other places. People start working 8 to 1, 8 to 2, you know what I mean? It's just like a 4-hour day or a 6-hour day, and the rest of the day they're just sleeping. That's not something that's good for your body, and it's not something that, you know, that is recommended, obviously. So, there's a question.
Zubair, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Then we...
So, Church-Strauss disease, or DGPA, PGA. I find that I feel better when I don't eat. You know, I have a lot of food allergies. So when I'm not eating, I feel best. Normally, throughout a day. But when I have to eat, I have to eat. So I can start a day and I'll be fasting. But then at 4 or 5 o'clock, I kind of get, you understand what I'm saying? And normally, you know, if I'm not eating, I feel I'm great. That's when I feel best. Because it attacks my,
Yeah, the brother said he had Sturge-Strauss. It's a type of vasculitis.
yes.
Okay. That question would be for somebody who's a rheumatologist or specialized. But again, what you mentioned is, at the end you said, you know what I mean? I agree. Well, I don't know what you mean. Because you would know better than anybody else. I don't know what you mean. Honestly, I'm not trying to be funny. I don't know what you mean. And if the difficulty is that it hurts, or I don't know. It really depends. So maybe I'll let Dr. Zubair answer.
Yeah, I mean, with some of these vasculitic diseases, I guess blood flow becomes an issue. And sometimes lack of hydration or hydration, wherever it may be, affects how blood flows. I think part of that can affect whether, when you feel hunger, I don't know if you feel like pain, or is it different than pain?
It's not really pain, but I can just tell that I need to eat.
Yeah, and if you don't eat for a while, does it cause you any trouble, or it's just you feel like you need to?
Pain comes.
Pain comes, right? So the pain is related to the vasculitis there, probably related to starting to get a little dehydrated, less blood flow causes issues. That can be a serious issue. So either the thing, and when you start feeling it. So you could either try and fast, and as soon as you start if you start feeling that, because you're going to get to that pain, break your fast when you feel that. If it would be better for you to wait till the winter, then wait till the winter. You're not going to get as dehydrated with the heat. Days are shorter. So I mean, you're going to have to figure that part of it out with your doctor, obviously making sure that they feel that's okay, because that pain can be a serious issue if the pain comes. So do what it takes to avoid the pain, I would say.
Let me just qualify that. You should start every day fasting. All right? And so if you get to that point, as the doctor mentioned, where it's going to become problematic, if that's what happens during that day, then at that point you break your fast. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So in other words, you're going to intend to start your day fasting. And then you never, like you said, you don't know. You do know that when it's time for you to eat, you have to eat. But that time may not actually be until, let's say, 10 minutes before Maghrib. And then you can hold out for that 10 minutes, inshallah, and you'll have fasted that day.
So excuse me. So on that day that I break, would I make that day up?
Yes. On the day that you break, even if you fasted more than half the day, you're going to have to make that day up. And so you'll wait till the winter time, inshallah, if that is something that is possible. If it's to the point that even in the winter, it doesn't work for you, then that would be the type of chronic illness where you would wind up feeding a poor person for each day, and you will avoid the fast totally. Let me just say this too on another note. For those who, that was indiscriminate. For those who are not fasting during the month of Ramadan, don't feel bad. I mean, meaning that you were trying, you want to fast, but you can't. There's still so much else that you can do besides the fast. You can, number one, you can lower your food intake, not because you're fasting, but just because you want to be healthier. You don't want to be as satisfied. Because, again, you don't want to get to that point where you're overeating. We all know that if we overeat, what comes next? Laziness. The itis, as the doctor said. So it's real, and then you just get lazy, and then you want to, if you eat a whole lot. This is one of the, also some of the hikmah that you have to look at. When you break your fast, not eating too much because it makes you lazy for Isha and Tarawih. Think about the days when you just, one of those days when somebody invited you over and they just had the whole spread out. You just couldn't resist. How do you stand in Isha and Tarawih? It's not the same. You don't have that same energy. So during the month of Ramadan, even if you're not fasting, but you lower your intake of food. And number two, read the Quran more. Just do what is encouraged to do, because the month itself is blessed, even if you're not fasting. And so you're increasing your reading of the Quran, increasing dua. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you with wealth, feed the Muslims, because every Muslim that you feed for iftar, you'll get the reward of their fast, even though you weren't fasting. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless you with the reward of 100 people that you fed for iftar or otherwise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. We've reached our limit. What do we do?
9:30 is what it says on the schedule.
Oh, it said 9:30?
That's what it says.
Oh, okay. Alhamdulillah. All right. Tight. We were going around. You what, Shay?
Yeah, I come back.
So, I
Oh yeah, we have a lot of questions from the sisters.
ladies first.
Ladies first. That's all right.
And in general, to come back to your question again, and also other people that fast with difficulty and they may feel bad, like Shaitan said, you know, Prophet ﷺ said that Allah loves that you take his rukhas, his concessions, just like he loves that you leave his azab.
إن الله يحب أن تؤتى رخصه كما يحب أن تؤتى عزائمه. ده في رواية.
The one I'm talking about, yeah. Yeah.
طيب ماشي.
The one I'm talking about is in Ahmad and Tabarani. So Allah loves that you take his concession. If Allah gave you a concession and you're not sure, is it difficult, you have some difficulty, consult with your doctor, because some things like a vasculitis or somebody's had a blood clot, when you get dehydrated, your blood viscosity goes up, and there are certain things that can precipitate having a thrombosis or a blood clot. One of those three main things is being dehydrated, your viscosity. So if you're dehydrated, your blood viscosity goes up, you're putting yourself at risk. How high is that risk? Or what is the elevation risk? Allahu A'lam. But is it elevated? Yes, for sure. Things like Sherk-Strauss, things like lupus. Because people that have those type of things can get thrombosis, like they can get a cavernous sinus thrombosis. They can get thrombosis inside one of their veins inside their belly, splenic vein thrombosis. So those type of things, even though you've never had it, you need to talk to your doctor and say, how likely is it, or how possible is it that I could have this if I don't drink anything for 14 hours? I think we're at 12, 13, 14, something like that this year. But, so, you know, you want to do what you want to do, but also part of being healthy is preventative health. Even though you've never had those things before, you want to ask and see how possible is it that I could have a serious complication. And then sometimes those things are closer than you think, you know. I'll do the first question here about the stress test, because I do a lot of cardiac procedures. If the brother or sister said, I have to get a stress test done, and they have to use a water-based isotope. Does this break the fast? They say, if you're unable to fast during Ramadan for medical reasons due to the length of time going without food, this isn't the same question? It's the same handwriting.
It's a different question.
Okay. Okay, so for a stress test, usually people are ordered a stress test because either they have symptoms, they're having chest pain, or they have an abnormal EKG and they have no symptoms. So it really depends on why you're having the stress test. But usually you're having it because your doctor is worried significantly that they think that you may be susceptible to having a heart attack, or you may have blockages that are silent. So being dehydrated and stressing yourself out by fasting, by doing something strenuous, by exercising can precipitate that type of symptom where you get chest pain. So I would say if you're ordered a stress test, you need to talk to your doctor and ask them, is it something that I can, you know, do earlier before Ramadan, or can I do it after Ramadan? Meaning, is waiting 30 days a significant risk to my health? If they say, I need you to have this next week or this week, or I don't need you to wait, you need to have this done, then I would say you need to make up the date, and the amount of IV fluid you get with the isotope may vary. But at the end of the day, if you're getting an injection, in my opinion, there's a lot of discussion about whether it's nourishing or not nourishing, but there is a minimum component there that's water. So you're getting some amount of water. And what's that?
Saline.
Saline. I mean, there's water there. So some part of it is nourishing, and if you're unclear, best to stay away from things that are unclear. You can make it up, as Allah says, and made it easy for us.
No, that's good for that. I mean, I'm going to read the next one. I have a child with cystic fibrosis. He is 7.5. His mutation isn't like the average CF patient. every year he wants to fast. What advice can you give? I think this is a little bit more difficult. Cystic fibrosis can vary in severity, so each case needs to be taken. How severe is the case? I mean, some people with cystic fibrosis live relatively normal lives, and others can't make it out of childhood and everything in between. So it really matters how severe it is, how much that dehydration affects them, because there is a lot of mucus that happens in cystic fibrosis, and that can get worse with dehydration. So it's important to talk to the doctor, but at 7.5, maybe doesn't even need to fast at this point. So maybe you can encourage them to do short days or have some kind of minimal fast for them, a few hours, and give something special to them anyway. But that's what I would say for that.
For what our scholars taught us in terms of fasting for children is that we follow the same pattern that we follow with the salat. So just as we encourage them to pray when they are 7, we encourage them to fast when they are 7. But our encouragement for prayer at 7 is not like when they are 10. The encouragement at 7 doesn't mean that when Fajr is at 4 o'clock in the morning, you go start sprinkling water on their face and tell them to, get up at 7 years old. It's the idea of beginning to pray. Come on, let's pray together. So they're awake and they pray with you. And yes, maybe if they're not going to school that day, it's a weekend, and but it's you're easing into the situation so that by the time they're 10, right, prayer is their thing. They do it without you asking them, without you probing, because it's become a part of who they are. So the fast is similar in that regard. When in the summertime, and like these days coming up, which are 15.5, 16 hours that we're looking at fasting this Ramadan, and the child is 7 years old, even encouraging them to fast the entire day may not be the wisest thing to do, especially if we're talking about a child with a medical condition. What you can do, as Dr. Zubair mentioned, is have them fast for a certain portion of the day so that they catch the last part of the day. So they may fast from 4 o'clock until Maghrib. And so they feel special. They feel like they're part of the family. When everybody's around breaking fast, they felt like they did something. And they did. And they did, mashallah. And even that's what I'm saying is that even our scholars used to tell us that that's how their mothers and fathers used to do them, 70, 80 years ago, that they would take them in that same way, gradually introducing the fast to them, so that by the time they are actually responsible for fasting, it's not a shock. And that's what happens to some parents. A brother came to me yesterday and said, his daughter's 10 years old, she's menstruating, she's pubescent. And we never really talked to her about fasting, and now what are we supposed to do? Well, now we got a lot of cleanup to do, because she's responsible now. The angels are right. And we have to, and I've mentioned this on several occasions, but we have to stop following, another system that was, basically imposed on us to tell us, well, they're adults at 18 and they can, do haram stuff at 21 and, all of that. No, our children, from the time they hit puberty, they are responsible in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have any magical number out there. And so we have to, our number is 7. This is when we start, encouraging them to fast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Sure.
When you were mentioning about as far as the ayat that said your teeth were like it's difficult. No. So how does one draw the line? For example, a patient who has sickle cell C hemoglobin, not sickle cell anemia, but sickle cell C hemoglobin, but they're worried and they were just hospitalized. They were suspected to have pulmonary embolism, and they didn't find an embolism, but you were mentioning about the hydration, and you were also mentioning about, or they were also informed about the viscosity of the blood. So in light of that and that ayat, should they do the fidya, or do you think that they should consider or look into the possibility of making it up in winter But at the same time, even in winter, if the days are shorter, there's still a concern for the hydration of the blood and other matters that, you know, and the patient is like around 40, 42 years old. With sickle cell C,
Yeah, with sickle cell C, you'll get less crises, like a chest crisis or acute pain crisis. Not to say that it can't happen, it can still happen, so it really depends. If you've never had a crisis before,
yeah, they've had acute chest syndrome.
if the person's had acute chest syndrome, then I would say no, you should not do it, even in the winter. However, if you think you've done it before in the past and you're proving me wrong, you can try it. But again, I would say there's a risk there, and each time the risk may be multiplied. So it really depends. You know, some people, they just have sickle cell trait, and they don't have the disease, and they've never had any problems. They've just been told by their family, it runs in our family. But they personally just have sickle cell trait. For them, I would say yes, you can try it, but it really depends on the person. You know, especially if you've had a chest crisis before, or the person's had some type of severe reaction, you know, I would say no, you should not.
Yeah, I agree. Any type of sickle cell crisis in the past, you're at higher risk to develop another crisis in the future. I mean, I think part of it is, you know, anybody with sickle cell should be working with a hematologist. If they're not, they should be. But your hematologist is going to know your case the best. And I think it's important to discuss exactly what fasting you're doing at this time or in the winter with your hematologist, because that's their specialty. They know how much it's affected you, what your risk of being affected is again. So that's definitely an individual thing, but in general, if you've had a crisis at any point, whether it's acute abdomen or chest or whatever else sickle cell crisis you may have had, or thrombosis from it, which is a blood clot, then my intuition would be to say, don't fast, particularly in the summer, because hydration is the biggest part for sickle cell. Maybe in the winter when it's colder and you're going to keep it, but you'd have to talk to your hematologist and get that one cleared.
And the last part, I'm sorry. Oh, the last part was for the one who does the fidya in that situation, are they rewarded likewise the person who fasted when they do fidya? Is their reward, like, do they still get the reward?
Like, so to answer that question, which kind of ties into some of the other questions that have been asked, is a person who makes fidya, do they get the same reward as the person who fasted? The fidya is a substitute for the fast. When we say fidya, we're talking about what do they call it? Expiation. It's basically a monetary, expiation in this sense for not being able to fast, right? And so here the answer is fadlullahi wasi', that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's bounty and His grace is expansive. We can't put we're not going to put any limits on that. And how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards a person is based on the intention. A person may fast the entire day, and their reward is not the same as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Hadith al-Qudsi when talking about fasting. Illa as-sawm fa innahu li wa ana ajzi bih. That all of that part of the Hadith, but all of the deeds that a person does are multiplied 10 to 700 times. The reward for it multiplied 10 to 700 times, except for fasting. It's for me, wa ana ajzi bihi. It's for me, and I reward for it. In other words, that it may be well over 700 times. But a person may, during their fast, do things that absolutely destroy the reward of their fast, like lying, which totally destroys the reward of one's fast. Doesn't mean the fast is invalid, but it means that they don't get the reward. So will a person, who makes fidya get the same reward as a person who fasts? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what that reward will be for any of them. But the truth of the matter remains that all of actions are based on the intention. So if the person's intention was to fast, but they really didn't have the ability and they do a 50, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards them for that in the night time. So the other question though, that is, it's broad. It says if you're unable to fast during Ramadan for medical reasons due to the length of time going without food, however, you can fast during the winter months. Does this person have to still make an expiation, meaning feeding people? And the answer is absolutely not. So if a person cannot fast right now because they're sick, for whatever reason it may be, it may not just be because of the length of time, it may just be whatever it is, and they make those days up later, as long as that is before the next Ramadan, then the only thing that they have to do is fast. That's it. All they have to do is make up the fast. There's no expiation and fast. But for those people who have chronic illnesses and they're never going to be able to fast, then for those people, they are to expiate for each day that they miss by feeding a poor person. And that is their way of making up for the fact that they were not able to fast. This is going to be the last question. Oh, we got, mashallah, the room came alive. Allah Akbar. Okay. Okay, so maybe what we'll do, okay, so for the sake of everybody, what we'll do is we'll try to just take one more of the sisters' questions, okay? And then we'll pray. And then after the salat, the doctors will sit on the side, inshallah, and try to take as many questions that you have before we leave, inshallah. All right? So take the sisters' questions because they won't